Good morning. I'm Sara Barris, and clinical psychologist. I've been working with couples for many, many years. I've also been married for almost 30 years. I'm here to talk about marriage and genuine intimacy over the long haul. Marriage and well-being has been researched and studied over the years for many different cohorts, because unhappy marriages lead to unhappy people, and that's, really is very expensive for the economy. So, the empirical evidence has shown us that regardless of SES, social economic status, race, religion, there is a group of people who have excellent marriages over the long haul, and another group that are not doing well at all. And researchers like George Valiant, Ellen Langner, Fredrickson, and John Gottman have studied these happier people with excellent marriages and are looking at what are they doing right, what do they all have in common, and what does the other group have in common, what are they doing wrong. And what they're seeing, according to John Gottman, is that in that group that's sort of getting it wrong, they have about 69% of conflict that just never gets resolved. But the big surprise is that in the high group, there's about 69% of conflict that never gets resolved. So that's really interesting. Both groups are still arguing, and they still have conflict that they revisit again and again. So what is it? What is it that the other group is sort of doing right? What are those variables? And what they have found is that the excellent relationships develop and grow out of thousands of mundane interactions, tiny little pebbles, again and again and again. So the bottom line up front of the empirical evidence is about friendship, good, close friendship. I remember having a couple come in, and this guy is saying, you know what, I want my wife, I don't want just like another roommate. I don't want to be just like one of her friends. I want to be a soulmate. I don't want to be a best friend. I want to be her soulmate. If you want to be her soulmate, you want to be her best friend. You want to learn a lot about friendship. Now, it's interesting. Theorists postulate that at the heart of great relationships, there is this concept of shared common interests, companionship, raising children together, trust, loyalty, physical intimacy, doing things together. Now, Daniel Weil, who's an expert on relationship, disagrees. And he talks about this friendship piece, and he says, at the heart of a great relationship is being able to say what you need to say and having that feeling that it has gotten across, being able to share what is on your mind, being able to say what is on your mind. That is at the heart. And when you can do that, then all of those things, companionship, raising children together, trust, loyalty, physical intimacy, all of that becomes worthwhile, meaningful, and purposeful. So, the good news is that friendship, there's skill in friendship. What is that skill? I'm going to break that down to kind of user-friendly variables so that it can be applied and that we can actually move and grow in that direction. John Gottman has coined a term, love maps, knowing and being known. Deutsch, who's a brain scientist, asks, how many brain cells are allotted to your partner's inner world? So when we say knowing and being known, we're talking about keeping up with your spouse in terms of the tiniest little details, the lightest of touch, like what's your favorite candy? What games did you play when you were a kid? What side of the bed do you like to get up on? Those are the sort of trivial little tiny things. And then there's the deeper stuff. What did it mean to be a brother, a sister, a mother, a father in your home growing up? What was your Sabbath table, your Shabbat table like? And what scares you in the middle of the night? And what really scares you in the middle of the night? And so with the non-judging acceptance, it's not about evaluating, like I need to find out about you, but it's more about authentic connection and emotional intimacy. We want to be on the same planet. And again, it's not about the control, it's about the connection. So we're talking about light touch, deep mercy, getting into any kinds of detail where we're going to know about our partner, knowing and being known. So it's sweet when I share this with some of the couples that I work with, the young couples who are just getting married, like in premarital, they'll say like, oh my gosh, like we did that already. No. That will take your lifetime to talk about knowing and being known. That is something that's going to happen across your lifetime, and that's something that you're going to update every couple of weeks. And when we say go out on dates, it's not just to have a good time. It's to kind of really share, like, how's it going at work, and how did that meeting go? And how is Sheer going? And that's what we're talking about, really keeping a pulse. It's interesting. Some people will say, you know, I was at a conference once and I had to be out of town, and I was at somebody's home for the weekend for a Shabbat afternoon meal, and this guy was a big international real estate man, and he had a lot of exotic guests at his table. It was a lovely woman, a man, and they were talking about international real estate. And it was interesting, and his wife leaned over and said, oh my gosh, this is like so over my head. I have nothing to do with this. That's not cute anymore. We want to know what our spouses are doing, not to keep control, but to get a sense of connection, because that's what keeps the connection going. And again, I have another friend whose spouse is a physicist, and she's an educational tutor. But she doesn't have the details of his physics, but she knows about the politics in the lab. She knows about the frustrations. She knows about the celebration. She knows about the grants that are coming in. It's about keeping your connection going. Okay, so that's number one, knowing and being known across your lifetime again and again and again. Number two, surprise, surprise, gratitude. Gratitude and admiration. We're wired with the negativity bias. This helped us survive over time. It helped us with the Ice Age. If we felt like, oh my gosh, it's like so amazing outside and so sunny and beautiful, we wouldn't have been prepared. And so we needed to have that negativity bias to scout out our environment, to prepare ourselves in terms of protecting our young, etc. But that kind of wiring at this point in time doesn't help us for long-term relationship and for real emotional intimacy. And so we kind of have to work on leaning towards the other way. And this, it's interesting. There is a guy named Sara, who's a big researcher, who would go to these business meetings and he would track positive to negative statements, positive to critical statements during these meetings. And what he found was those companies that had a very high positive to negative ratio did much better economically than the others who had a negative to positive ratio. And they found the same thing for couples. A higher positive to negative ratio of positivity, like a 5-to-1, predicts a strong, loving relationship. And so we call it hunting the good stuff so that we can shift around that cortical real estate, because the brain is kind of greedy, and when there's negativity and we continue on negativity, the cerebral cortex will kind of take over and keep going down that path, down that neural path. So we need to hunt the good stuff, which is about anything, even like tiny things, like thank you so much for driving me, thank you for setting up my vitamins, thank you for covering me, I know you want me to be warm, to just random, like you're incredible, I'm blessed that you're in my life, and I watched you play with the baby, you're amazing. People are afraid to be positive. They're afraid to be corny. They're afraid to be sappy. They're afraid to overuse the love word. We hear these young people like, I'm not going to overuse the love word because I feel like I don't want to say like, I love you, because people are really overusing it. We want to overuse the love word. The research shows us, the empirical evidence shows us that we need to overuse that love word. Now, we're not whitewashing here. It's not whitewashing negative feelings, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But this is about, again, setting it up in a positive way. And people are afraid, again, to be corny, and we're saying, yes, be corny. There is a corniness factor here. People say, I'm just going to be spontaneous. I just like, if I feel it, I'm going to say it. And that's just the way it is. No. We're not looking for spontaneity. Spontaneity is really overrated. We're looking for a conscious, focused, disciplined response. And sometimes you won't necessarily be in the mood. And sometimes you kind of say things, and it's not about lying. It's about getting out of your comfort zone. And it's about stretching so that we can make that authentic connection. And it's about those small, tiny pebbles. Don't forget, I said earlier, it's those tiny, small details again and again. Thank you for helping me study. Thank you for helping me write that paper. Thank you for listening. Those are the tiny, small details, the gratitude, the admiration, again and again. Don't worry about spontaneity, and don't worry about being corny. Number 3, Alan Langner coined a term, bid for connection, turning towards. What does turning towards mean? It could be a tiny little grimace, would be turning away, rolling your eyes. Turning towards is a smile. Turning towards would mean you wake up in the morning and your partner says, I had this crazy dream last night. You could say like, oh my gosh, I'm running, tell me later. That's turning away. Turning towards is quick, tell me, I'm running out. What was your dream? My dream is so-and-so. Whoa, that is a crazy dream. I'll talk to you later. Turning towards means later on, for 10 seconds, doing that text or making a phone call and saying, I thought about your dream. And you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of da-da-da-da-da. Anyway, talk to you later. Those 10 seconds are much more powerful than the 1,001 ways to be romantic in all the little books that are out there. Because if you can turn towards and call up your partner during the day and say, I thought about that dream, or I thought about what you were sharing with me about your mom, or this and that, all of the 1,001 ways to be romantic will be much, much more effective. And what happens as well is that the grimace. Why did you come to my office a half an hour early? I told you to be there at 4:30. Those small things are kind of zingers that undo about 20 acts of kindness. But don't forget, we can begin again and again and again. That's what the evidence show us, that these are tiny things that we can kind of reshift and begin again to move towards connection. Okay, number 4, ACR, active constructive responding. Shelley Gable, brilliant researcher, talks about how you celebrate a relationship is more predictive of strong relationships than how you fight. What does that mean, how you celebrate? How you celebrate your partner's good news. She talks about 4 different ways of responding. She talks about active destructive, passive destructive, passive constructive, active constructive. I'll give you a couple of examples. Spouse comes home, it's amazing, got a promotion, I can't believe it, I am so excited. Active destructive is, wait a minute, I thought you actually didn't want to stay in that department. And didn't you say that you didn't want to work with that person because they always get into power struggles with you? And also, are you going to be staying out late Thursday night as well? Like, I don't understand. Active destructive. Now, there is a time and a place to voice your concern, but it's all about timing. What would be passive constructive? Passive constructive would be, oh, it's so nice. What's for dinner? Active constructive is, oh my goodness, tell me about it. Where were you? And how did you feel? And what did you say? And that is incredible. And don't you feel proud of yourself? That is amazing that that happened. And then afterwards, let's go out and celebrate. What you appreciate, appreciates. What you appreciate, appreciates and keeps kind of spilling over into all these other parts of your life. And that kind of emotional intimacy eventually leads into a tremendously positive bedrock of physical intimacy. It's interesting. In Gottman's research, he found that 70% of women claim that the real root of passion and romance in their marriage is deep friendship. And for men, the real root of passion and romance in their marriage is deep friendship. So they're from the same planet after all, aren't they? And so what about the arguments? what about those arguments? So we know, as we said till now, it's those subtle and mundane pieces that you move through day to day in your marriage that help connect you emotionally. But we need to have arguments. All relationships need to have it. As you know, initially I told you about 69% of conflict that we keep revisiting. So what they have found is that when we keep up with these things like knowing and being known and turning towards an appreciation and fondness and admiration again and again and again, when it does come time to have your arguments and to fight, your repair and recovery is quicker. So that group on top have 69% of conflict they revisit, but they recover and they repair much quicker than the couples who are down there. They also wound less, and that's what we're looking for as well. The other piece is that there's a positive sentiment override in those couples that are doing those tiny bits for connection and that friendship piece. They have a positive sentiment override, so that if your spouse tells you, like, why would you put that in the microwave? You know that that's just going to sort of burn the food in that way. Why would you do that? In a relationship with this negative sentiment override, that tipping point, what might go through the spouse's head is something like, why would she treat me like I'm 2 years old? I'm not 2. And then there's a negative spiral. But when there's positive sentiment override, because you've developed this positivity, there's something like, oh my gosh, she is one nervous wreck. Okay. And so there's a response that leans a little bit more to the positivity. But again, what about the real fights? So we know we need to have fighting. Fighting is usually an indication that we can kind of connect and that there's a way to weather conflict. It's really important. Couples that do not fight have a loss of vitality, and sometimes we feel that they're sort of in silent divorce, and we're concerned about that. Bob Weiss, who is, that relationship expert, talks about conversational booby traps. He talks about using I statements, empathic listening, don't dig up old grievances and pile them up together, don't interrupt, etc. So, he says that the important news is that we need to fight. The bad news is that about 100% of the time, in our arguments, we will fall into those booby traps. We're not going to be empathic or compassionate in our listening when the problem is about us. So while we're fighting, it's really, really hard to say, like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I really, really, really feel your pain, and yes, I'm going to improve. So we end up breaking every booby trap. We end up falling into all of those pits. So what do we do about that? Basically, what the advice is to kind of know that we first need to have that argument, and to know up front that you will kind of get defensive, you will mess it up at the beginning. You'll say the wrong thing, you'll pile up your stuff, etc., etc. And you will not be able to listen empathically. But what we're looking for here is a conversation after the conversation. Later on down the line, maybe that night, maybe the next morning, maybe a couple of days later. We need to get that fight over with, exit, try not to wound as much, and then we revisit and we have the right conversation, the conversation that needed to be had. Now, it's interesting, there are slogans out there that have a kernel of truth but are very, very dangerous. One such slogan would be, you never go to bed angry. That's not accurate. And it's kind of dangerous because couples many times fight at night, and at night your defenses are down. And because of that, couples will stay up till 2, 3, 4 in the morning continuing their fight, wounding each other very deeply. Not only are they not going to bed angry, they're staying up till early in the morning, and then they really begin to stonewall because they're very hurt. There is this idea that we can go to bed feeling upset because we may not resolve it, because that initial argument is difficult. And so we may have to say time out or exit, or we will talk about this tomorrow night, in a little while. That's really important in terms of that kind of closure. It's not necessarily going to happen that night. And again, we're looking for the conversation after the conversation. And now I want to move to the final piece and that we do call compassionate listening. So while you're fighting, it's hard to be compassionate, but there is a point in time for compassion in relationship. And that compassionate listening comes up when you want to share vulnerability with one another. We are in a culture, and we live in a point in time where we tend to push away our lives. So, for example, you know, when kids are in high school, like, let's just get through finals. Here in New York, it's let's get through regents, let's just get through graduation, let's just get through college, let us just get through the holidays, let's just get through Passover, let's just get through the bris. Let's just let the kid do his bar mitzvah, let him read the Torah, let him do it right, let's just get through, and now just let's get through the wedding. I just can't wait till this wedding. Let's just get through the Sheva Brachos. And you know what happens? We can be graced and blessed and have this incredible richness in our lives, but we kind of sidestep our lives by getting through, and then we slip under the radar screen right into our graves. And that's kind of sad. We want to know, how can we get up there and live consciously and start to really show up and live in a mindful way? Why is it that we tend to push away? Part of it is that we live in a space that really values strength and competence. We're afraid of vulnerability. We see somebody homeless, we cross the street, because it reminds us of everything that's contemptuous and scary. Demons, psychosis. It's frightening and it scares us. And we're also afraid of the good things. We're afraid of looking happiness square in the eye. We just kind of don't want to share it too much. It's like there's, we don't want to look at, even in Harry Potter, there's, he whose name we cannot mention. That's how happiness is. Like, you just don't, keep it down. I know somebody who had a baby and wanted another one, and they were afraid. They felt they had the nerve, the chutzpah, to pray for, like, can I have one more miracle? Like, I was miracle 3,240. Can I have just one more, please? I mean, we're afraid of looking joy in the eye, too, because we know that everything is impermanent. But, at the end of the day, we are all part of humanity, and there is vulnerability, and we don't have to cross the street to know that it hits us in our own living rooms. No one's immune. We're all part of it. And so when we can open up with compassion to the vulnerability in our partner, and we can provide a sanctuary for those unwanted parts, and we can be generous in our listening, that provides some kinds of opportunity to have dignity and respect and deep intimacy and this deep closeness to know that we're all in this together. And again, we're not looking for, like, pitying our partner, like, oh, poor thing. We're looking for compassion. Compassion and pity are different in the sense that compassion is about dignity, tenderness, respect, courage, the courage to keep showing up when it's hard, to put one foot in front of the other, the courage to sometimes know that it's okay to not be okay. Sometimes it is okay to not be okay, to doubt, to wonder, to struggle, to suffer. And so when we can show up for that in our partner, then we will find unsuspected goodness there. And it is precisely at our limits and at the edge of our imperfection where we begin again and again and again with light touch and deep mercy, pebble by pebble. How is your day? Can I make you a cup of coffee? Let's go to the grocery store. I watched you play with the baby. You're amazing. That's how we rebuild and build an inspired, holy connection. Thank you.